Hello, this is Yaakov Kronenberg from Jerusalem, and tonight we'll be doing another class in the series of classes on Gemini ascendant and Mercury, the ruling planet in the different signs. Tonight we'll be doing Mercury in Capricorn. Mercury in Capricorn, of course, is an interesting combination here with the Gemini ascendant, because the two signs don't go together so well. The nature of Capricorn is very different from the nature of Gemini. Capricorn is the most taciturn of the signs. Doesn't like to talk. You can't get it to say a word. You got to really push it to speak. And Gemini is the most loquacious of the signs. They're chatterboxes. So already when you have a Gemini that wants to express itself through Capricorn, it can be difficult. They have to work hard on to balance those two energies out. And again, Gemini, like we say, is always sort of superficial. They're not, the master of jack of all trades, master of none. They get themselves involved in so many different things. They don't have time to master like one thing. And the Capricorns, more than anybody, well, maybe not as much as the Scorpio, but the Capricorns, they focus in on what's important to them. The Capricorn are the great builders of the zodiac. Not the builders maybe isn't the right word. The fixed signs are more the builders. The Capricorns are the ones who want to get to the top, right? And they want to get to the top of the hill. And they'll do anything to get to the top of the hill, and they'll put all their energy in one thing just to get to the top of that hill, which isn't the Gemini way so much. And so again, it's going to be an energy sort of problem. How the Gemini can work itself out through the Capricornian energies. Oh, so let's go on. And so when you have a Mercury, though, when you have Mercury, will be in the 8th house, which is also difficult. Mercury will be in the house of death. So one thing, the person's always going to be worried about death. That's always going to be a concern of theirs. And it's also connected with a lot of times it can be connected with mysticism, the unconscious, psychology, psychiatry, astrology, the different hidden arts. I've seen people with the 12th house strong, the 8th house strong. They work in X-rays, X-ray technicians. I've seen lots of them. Magicians, people are professional magicians. They tend to have the 8th house strong. All sorts of different things like that. But anyway, there's going to be an interest in the 8th house affairs. And also the 8th house, of course, rules death and it rules change, right? The death is the main change, where you go from one world to the next world. And so people don't like change. They tend to resist change as much as they can. And so it's considered a difficult house because people have a lot of planets in that house undergo changes, whether they like it or not. Tonight we're going to see a chart of somebody who unfortunately had a bad reason to undergo a lot of changes. We'll come back to that. But I've seen, so at the 8th house, people say it rules accidents, misfortunes, death. It also rules sex and pregnancy and things like that. Because it's under the rulership in Adam Rishon's chart of Scorpio, and Scorpio is the sign of the sexual organs. So it's connected also with that part of life, reproductive system, all sorts of things like that. So if the 8th house is strong, all those areas of life are going to be important. Tonight I want to look at a chart, very famous woman. What can I say about her? Well, we'll talk about her in a minute. She was very famous in America as as a singer, actually. She has this combination of Gemini, Capricorn, and she used it as a singer. And I don't know, I've been looking at the chart. It's a little hard to see singing in the chart. But, yeah, it's there. I mean, she's a very, very powerful Venus, we're going to look at in a second. Right? She's a Gemini rising, and the strongest planet in her chart, a planet that makes the tightest aspect to the ascendant, of course, is Venus. Right? So she has Venus almost exactly on the 7th house cusp, opposite the ascendant. And so that's going to add beauty to the chart. It adds beauty, it adds musical, it adds artistic talent, right? When you have Venus, the tightest aspect to the ascendant, remember, it makes the person more attractive. Venus is the planet of attractiveness, of love, of things like that. So in her chart, she has the Venus, the strongest planet in her chart. But unfortunately, the Venus is also, let's say there's another planet actually that's very, very powerful in the chart, which is Saturn. Saturn is also angular. It's on the 4th house cusp, and it's exactly square to that Venus. So that's it'll maybe take away some of the beauty, but it means an artistic, she has exactly square, so it means a career in the music, in art, right? Because Saturn is the career, and when it makes a tight aspect to Venus, like this is almost exactly conjunct, it indicates a profession, a musical or an artistic profession. In her case, it was musical. But it's always an indication of that. I remember when I first started working in astrology, I tell this story a lot. I lived in a building with a lot of models, and I ended up somehow doing all their horoscopes, and almost all of them had tight Saturn-Venus aspects. They used their beauty to become, to make money, to become as their profession, their artistic profession. And but in any case, going on, so that I would say the main point in her chart is that square to the Saturn is square to the Venus, and it's square to the ascendant. So that takes away a lot of the joys of life when you have Saturn in the 4th house. It means you didn't have a happy childhood, and she's a big worrier, this lady. When you have Saturn in Virgo, it leads to worry. And there's going to be a conflict between her and her home life, right? Her and her family. And so eventually she left. Well, let's come back to that. See, if you look in her chart, she also had 4 planets in the 8th house. So that's what we call in astrology. So she has a stellium in the 8th house, 4 planets, which makes the 8th house of her chart very important. And again, it's also money, right? It's a money house. It means she's going to be quite wealthy. But when you look at it, that already indicates there's going to be problems there, right? Because you have 4 planets in the house of death, in the house of misfortune and accidents. And in her chart, they're all connected to the Saturn, but the Saturn, they're all trying to the Saturn. And they're all square. Mars in the stellium, the strongest planet in the stellium by far is Mars, right? Mars is the highest one by degree, and it's also an exaltation. So everything is giving itself over to that Mars, and Mars is a very violent sign. And her ascendant is conjunct, the ruler of her ascendant is conjuncted. A ruler of ascendant is exactly conjunct Jupiter, which gave her again a great voice, right? Mercury has a connection with the voice, it's speaking. So it gave her a very, very nice voice, together with the Venus and the Jupiter are very, very powerful in her chart, the 2 probably the strongest planets. But she does have that stellium there in the 8th house, and so she was in a serious car crash, and it took her about a year and a half, 2 years to recover. And then after that, After that, she went through a lot of soul searching, and she decided to give up her career and devote herself to her family, to raising her children. And so you see that with that strong, the responsible Saturn in Virgo in the 4th house, opposed to her destiny, to her career. And so she gave up her career for the sake of her family after a lot of soul searching. That's the 8th house. The 8th house is the house of misfortunes and accidents. And so you see it really very powerful in her chart. And I thank everybody for listening.